Welcome to the Awakened Healer podcast. I'm your host, Mary Beth Vanderlinden. I'm an ordained Christian minister, international intuitive healer, healer trainer, speaker, and retreat facilitator. On the Awakened Healer podcast, myself and a wide variety of fascinating guests will share our gifts and divine experiences. I won't shy away from diving deep and asking big questions during these conversations. In turn, we will open up and share our deepest thoughts on spirituality, angels, intuitive development, crystals, healing of all kinds, and how bridging ancient wisdom with modern science can bring you to a deep and profound healing in every area of your life. Welcome to another episode of the Awakened Healer podcast. I'm your host, Mary Beth Vanderlinden, and today we'll be chatting with Belkis Clarke Mitchum. And she is an inspiration, and I'm so honored that she's agreed to be on with us today. Belkis is a motivational teacher and also a transformational life coach who's been helping women who have lived through trauma to identify their prisons and unleash their unique gifts or their unique light. And so she grew up on the tiny island of St. Kitts in the Caribbean, where her mother gave her the gift of faith and continues to impart her spiritual wisdom and life lessons to Belkis to this day. That foundation has sustained her through a huge amount of challenges that she has faced in her life. As a survivor of sexual abuse, Belkis has risen from a place of attempted suicide to really great success. For more than a decade, she's been captivating, inspiring, motivating, and teaching audiences across the globe, including survivors of sexual abuse and trauma, how to uncover their truth and their identity, their innate value, and map their purpose as they journey to legendary transformation. So if you're ready to unleash your light and go from victim to victory, you'll want to hear every word that this warrior has to say. Belkis holds a bachelor's in English and a minor in communication and an MA in human communication. She worked as a journalist for over 12 years and has taught at every level from preschool to university. She's recognized that her life's calling is actually coaching. And so she made that switch to her life's purpose and began doing what she is most passionate about. She's spent more than a decade now coaching suicidal and depressed teens and adults and is an ambassador for the Mission 22. Her writing has been featured on the International Red Cross website, local media in the Dutch Antilles, Thrive Global, and she has become a sought-after guest speaker. Belkis, welcome to Awakened Healer. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I am totally stoked to connect, not just with you, but with your listening audience. I am really happy to share this space with you.
Oh, very good. Well, I know you have quite the story to tell. Can you share with us a little bit about what you've experienced in your life? And then also, what do you feel helped you to switch that around?
Definitely. At a young age, I was sexually abused, and there was situations of incest where cousins, forced themselves on you. There were teachers who there was rape by a teacher, and there were a whole lot of experiences around sexual trauma, to the point that by the time I was 16, literally on my 16th birthday, I was walking out of the hospital, just released after my first attempted suicide episode, and they released me on my 16th birthday. And I went through years of who am I? Where is God? If he created me and said that he loved me, where is he? Why is it that only used for sex? Where are the people who were supposed to love me and protect me? And these were the processes that I went through and I struggled with. And that's how I ended up at a point of trying to commit suicide. And I would try that several times throughout my life. And each time it seemed as if I was just snatched back from the very edge. One of the things, as I went through that whole tormentorous period, I ended up married to a gentleman who was also abusive, because we tended to repeat the patterns.
Right.
Yeah. And so what I did, I remember it was a Wednesday evening, and our church was having these services, and they brought a speaker in, and his name was Pastor Richards. And he was a prophetic pastor, and he kept calling people up. But I was so tired, Mary, that I sat there. I could not even stand for the song service, for anything. I just sat there, tired, broken by life, feeling disappointed by everything. It seems going nowhere, and just hurt and ready to take myself out again, at least try. And
Right.
he was about to wrap up the service, and he turned around. He came back down from the altar, turned around, looked at me, and said, "You come here." And I weirdly looked over my shoulder because I didn't know who he was talking to. And he said, "No, you come here." He said to me, and I went up. And as I rose from my seat, I felt like a strong energy, but it was so much, it as if my body could not contain it. And I started to tremble, and I'm walking, and I'm shaking. And I stood before him, and I realized I felt the presence of God. It was as if God finally just focused and let me know his attention was on me. And that preacher told me, he said, the mark of God is on your life. He said, you're going places. And yeah, and he said, I'm not quite sure where you're going. He said, but there is a major change ahead of you. You're going places. It reminded me of a prophecy I had someone made when I was 11. They told me, you will speak before the nations on behalf of God.
Oh my gosh, I just got chills like through my whole body because I actually met Belkis in Texas. I don't know if it's been
Mhm.
about a month ago now.
About.
And she got up and told a little bit of her story, and I just had goosebumps from head to toe. She was such an inspiration, and I couldn't wait to have her as a guest on the show. And just hearing this of what happened with you. I had an experience very similar to
Mhm.
that at the age of 12 in a church, and had that same feeling like I had no control over my body. I
Mhm.
remember they called people up front that wanted to accept Christ as their savior. And I thought, I'm not going to go up there in front of all these people. If I could, I mean, I just ran down the aisle. And
Awesome.
so I can relate so much to this, experience that you had, and that's just awesome. So once you experience like the hand of God on your life,
Mhm.
did you right away have this huge revelation and change, or did it unfold over time?
I wish I could tell you it was some magical, pivotal moment, but it wasn't. We are so stubborn as human beings.
Yes,
We always figure God needs to show up in a certain way for us to know it is God. And he doesn't work that way. Otherwise, he would be at our command. So
right,
I did not, I went about my life, but the words would not leave me alone. Now, I have had experiences with God prior to that through dreams and other encounters and stuff like that, where he seemed to keep snatching me, snatching me, snatching me. So this was just like a culmination of previous experiences that I'd had since I was a child coming forward. And but still, I was not paying attention. I was living with a man who was not my husband, and
right,
God still kept trying to get my attention in so many ways. So no, I did not immediately pay attention, but he would not leave me alone. I was disturbed in my sleep. I kept having dreams, messages Like I would hear random messages and realize, and there was something disturbed inside of me that would not settle, and I felt driven. I used to go jogging and I used to run as if I was pursued, but it's as if I'm running from myself or from God, which you can't.
Right. Can't get away. Yeah.
Exactly. But there came a point when the guy that I was with, he was abusive, and I felt so broken. I married him actually in the whole process of finding my purpose. But here is what happened. I was not present at a group meeting. I had just joined a new church when I got married. I was not present at a group meeting. I was new to the church, yet they wanted to launch a youth group and they chose me in my absence.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
that youth group became like a mini revolution in our community with me at the helm. That is how God taught me. He taught me, if for all that you've been through, there are other young people going through it. He said, but you've got to live a life that they can emulate. You can't tell them about purity if you do not live purity. You can't tell
Right.
them about the value of themselves if you do not know how to first discover that value for yourself. So he, throughout that leadership position, it forced me into a place where I had to, all the principles that he was trying to teach me, all the scriptures and everything, all of a sudden I had to put them into practical application, and I watched my life transform.
Oh, I just got goosebumps all over again. That's just awesome. And I know that that abuse from the teacher wasn't the only
No.
trauma that you suffered, and it, not that we need the, details of anything, but can you just quickly share a few of the things that you have gone through? And then also share in those things, how did you see God show up?
Well, definitely. I did not like Saturdays. I did not like Saturdays, or I did not like the color yellow for two reasons. It was a Saturday when a teacher who asked me to come to the school in our neighborhood to help grade books that were packed up, like exercises that they had fallen behind on grading, so that they'd be prepared for the Monday to give back to the students. It was
Right.
a Saturday that I went to that school, all faith, all trust, and feeling special for being chosen, only to have myself pressed up against a metal desk and raped. And it was a
Mm,
Saturday, and I was wearing a yellow nightgown when I was first molested and told, look, I need to take you into the bathroom and all that, and how petrified I was. So here was this little girl. I was 10 years old when that first incident happened, if I remember correctly. The age sometimes seems a little blurred because we try to block things out. But I remember I was 10 years old wearing a long cotton yellow nightgown. And when that first incident occurred, I thought here was a father figure that I could just curl up, next to and watch some
sure.
TV, and that turned into something disastrous. And I was told that I couldn't tell anyone, and all I could think about, if I spoke up, the kind of trouble I would get in, and maybe my mom wouldn't have anybody to help her raise us, and she'll have to struggle on her own. So I started protecting everybody.
Right.
And for a couple of years, I kept asking God, where are you? I can't hear you, see you. I don't know if you love me. I don't know if you know me. I don't know if you remember that you made me, but I just need to know. And you know who showed up? A cousin of mine showed up in my life that I did not know, who turned out to be the hand I needed in a darkness, who has stood with me for over the period of more than 20 years, who has talked to me and coached me through many a suicidal thought and depression moment. God showed up in the face of an individual who said, I am
Right.
here in your face. Call me at 1 o'clock in the morning. Call me at 2 o'clock. Call me whenever. I am here. I am here for you. And they were consistent all the way. That is how I learned as well how to be the same thing for other young men and women in my community who were suicidal, who were being abused, who were depressed. So God answered through an individual who, when it seemed everybody else was abandoning me, he became consistency of love, support, and a representative of God in my life.
So don't you think that's like one of the issues is people expect God or expect guidance to show up in a certain way. They're not open to however it comes. And oftentimes it isn't at all in our wildest dreams how we think it should show up or would show up. And because they're not aware, they miss it.
Exactly. And you're saying this, and it is so true because I've been guilty of that in the past. We figure, oh, this is how I expect God to look based on teachings, based on other people's experiences. But like I said in the beginning, if God did everything how we expect, then he'd be at our command and he failed to be God. So we
Right.
need to learn to open up ourselves. And I think sometimes we are scared. It is that control mechanism that we tend to have. We want God, but we still want to be in control because we know when God showed up. No, and I'm so serious. You know what I used to tell
Yeah.
God? Sometimes you need to leave me alone because whenever he showed up, he just blew everything out of the water and it scared the living bejesus out of me. It did. I'm like,
Oh,
I used to say when God shows up, all hell break loose. And then someone said to me, no, they said when God shows up in your life, all of heaven breaks loose.
yes, yes, amen.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And so you were right. We want God to show up in a certain way because it's controllable. We could still seem as if we're not losing our minds and we are normal. Well, here is what God is not meant to live in the confines of our minds, and He is here to time and time again blow the mind you think you have and recreate a new mind in you.
Oh, amen. That's absolutely so true. And I've seen that over and over and over with
Mm-hmm,
clients of mine. And Belkis, let me ask you
mm-hmm,
this. A lot of times people are like, well, I don't know how to connect. I want desperately to connect to that wisdom within me, or I want desperately to connect with, the guides, the angels, with God, with Jesus.
mm-hmm.
But they're just at a loss. They say, well, I keep asking, but I'm not, getting any answers. But we both know that they are getting answers. They're just missing them. So
Mm-hmm.
can you share with the audience a way to help them hear or a way to help them connect with God or with their spirit team, whatever they want to call it?
Mhm. Good, no problem at all. I'll be happy to. First thing first, it's like a child. A child recognizes the voice of a parent over anybody else through constant exposure. And I'm not talking about just hearing it through other people's messages, which means you've got to silence the world, which is a biggest problem for a lot of us. So you've got to find your quiet space, physically quiet space, and your inner quiet space. And it starts with turning off everything that you've heard. You don't want music. You don't want any speaking in the background. You need a total, absolute silence. And for some people, it will take a few efforts, a few attempts. Maybe you'll find yourself going back and forth in how to silence your mind. What I do a lot of the times to silence my mind and focus on God is I get a scripture verse, and I teach this to others. I choose a scripture verse that talks about how good and how awesome God is. I would pick one. And I will get into my quiet space and I just start focusing on that verse and that verse alone. What it does is it helps to zone in where you're at and it helps to shut everything else out. And so you would find, and through breathing in the process, if I am breathing, oh Lord thy God, how great thou art. And I'm just saying that over and over in my mind. And then I start to think about how great is God really. And then I might start with something very wide, like the world, but look at what he really created. And I start to think about the awesomeness of the world. And then I start bringing it in home closer. What have God done in my life that is so great? And so I have taken a scripture verse and I have focused. And all of a sudden, everything else is silent. And the only thing before me is the awesomeness of God. And when you breathe, you slow your breathing to go with what you're feeling. So you're feeling in awe. And when you're in awe, there's no rapid breathing. There is just a slow, controlled breathing, and you keep that focus on the awesomeness and the awe of who God is, and you do not let any other thought, any other worry, anything else in. And as you go through that breathing process, everything settles, and then you start to stop looking outward and start looking inward, because all of a sudden you're not focused on your physical anymore. So it opens up for the spiritual, for you to be connected to your spiritual, and you are still focusing on the awe of this God, the awesomeness, the greatness of this God. And you allow yourself to relax into the breath, into a breathe. So when you inhale and you exhale, you relax into that breathing, and you feel that on your inside, the core of who you are, because that is where spirit resides. So all of a sudden, it's as if the physical have fallen away, and you are only in the awesomeness and the greatness of this God that you serve, the spiritual being. And what you're doing through your breathing is opening up your spiritual centers to allow what he has already wired into you to be activated. And before you know it, other thoughts about his greatness and his awesomeness that's coming to you. And you start seeing more and more how God has been great to you. And you start realizing, wait, maybe I wanted God to speak to me in this way, but you start to realize the repeated messages that have been coming to you. You start to whether it is, maybe you had a dream, maybe 2 or 3 persons have said something to you, and there is something that people need to remember at this moment, Mary, is that
Right.
God never goes against his word. If you want to know the voice of God in that moment, it will always be supported by his word. So if you've got a repeated message, a repeated angle, a repeated thing that kept coming to you, God's been trying to get your attention, and usually it scares you. It's the thing you don't want to face. It does scare you. So,
Yeah, he never makes it easy. Yeah, you have to
mhm.
really, really have courage and just be ready to step out in what you're told to do. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and that is one of the ways I teach people to hear God. You've got to silence everything and how do you really hear an individual? You as a isn't it when you totally block everything out and pay attention, you zone into their space, their
right,
energy,
you have to be quiet and listen.
yeah, and you really connect in a way. And so that's what you need to do to get, but you cannot recognize God if you don't know how he speaks, what he speaks, and I'm talking about his word. So no matter which way the message comes, it will resonate with his word.
And also, I mean, we have that wisdom within us. There
Hmm.
should be something in us that we're just going like, yes, yes,
That's
that's
right.
it. That's the answer. It isn't something that makes us feel fear or want to recoil or shrink back or something like that. We want to go to it.
That's right,
And
because it
it's like,
feels
this
right.
feels familiar.
That's right. Can I share something quickly on that? This
Yes,
is
yes.
something that I'm presently working on, I'm writing about. It is called your spiritual DNA. We were a spiritual concept first, then manifested physically, and then infused with God's spirit. But it wasn't just a breath he breathed into us, because our breath have tiny droplets of water in it and other moisture that has parts of our DNA in it. So when God breathed life into us, so first we were a spiritual concept, then he put a physical form over it, and then he took a part of his DNA and infused it into that spiritual concept that was physically shaped so that it was activated. So our first activation was a spiritual one. The physical world that we live in tends to cover that, blanket it, and keep it dormant. And we tend to listen more to the physical because we become people that pleases the flesh. But when we hear the voice of God, there is something in us that feels right. And we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is God speaking to me. Even if we get nervous, even if we want to hesitate, we know when we know something, and we would bet our bottom buck on it.
Exactly, exactly. And that's one of the ways you can know that that is who you're
That's right.
hearing from.
That's
So,
right.
Yeah, and so let me ask you this. I know that you recently launched a course
Yeah.
called No Apologies.
Yes,
Does
ma'am.
that fit into the discussion we're having in some way? And can you just briefly tell us a little bit about that and how
Actually,
that can help our listeners?
no apologies deal with tapping into your authenticity. And actually, it is the springboard for then going into the coaching program that I have, where that's where I deal more with the spiritual concepts. So the course in and of itself, though I am planning a course that deals with the spiritual concept of authenticity, purpose, truth, and value, and the no apologies talk about owning who you were created to be. So you will have the spiritual aspects coming up, because who you were created to be is partly spiritual as well. So it talks about owning who you are, owning who you were meant to be, dropping the mask and the facades, and stepping into the light that you're supposed to live in, and be reflecting who you were designed to be, and making no apologies about it. We live our lives too many times apologizing for too many things.
Right, that's true. And being unapologetically your imperfectly perfect self.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody wants you to live according to their shoulds. We were not put on this earth to live by anybody else's shoulds.
That's right.
We were uniquely made. We're here to be who we are.
That's right.
And if you're living according to other people's shoulds, then you're not living according to who God made you to be.
And that is
And
an injustice and a disservice to God.
right, right, exactly. And didn't you really just feel like you came alive once you realized what your passion and your purpose on earth really was?
Oh my goodness. The day that I started to see, when I had done my degrees, both of a bachelor's and master's, I was like, I'm not going back to 9 to 5. There was such, it was such, my mother was like, say what now?
That door is closed. Yeah.
I was like, mm-mm. God, I said, God has called me to speak. It is the thing that when I speak, I command the stage because of the power that He uses to flow through me. I said, and I am able to teach people. I said, that is where I belong. And it scares me to die and not try. But
Right.
yeah, and when I stand there, whenever I stand, whether it is in a church, because I speak in churches, I speak at seminars, I speak at youth groups, wherever I stand on a stage to speak and deliver, and know that that message is flowing from my truest place, which is supported by the truth God has wired into me, I feel alive. I feel as if every fiber of my being is on fire. I feel as if this is what it means to truly breathe and to feel every nuance just vibrate with life. And therefore, I can infuse that into the atmosphere and into others so they can tap into life and then be activated. Purpose is life. It is what we are to do. And I don't want anybody else's space. I love this space that is mine.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I mean, you can. I mean, I'm sure the entire listening audience can just feel it in their body. My body's just buzzing just from the energy coming like from you. I love this interview. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again. And Belkis, let us know, how can we contact you? Do you have a website?
Oh, yeah. I've got a website. It's www.belkisclarke.com. They can find me also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. I am all all across the social media spectrum. They can feel free, message me. Let's talk. I love meeting new people. I love starting a conversation. I love teaching what I do. And yeah, so they can find me on all those avenues.
Very good. So let me just spell that because it is different.
Hmm.
It's B is boy, E is in Edward, L is in Larry,
Hmm.
K
Hmm.
I S as in Sam,
Hmm.
C is in Charlie, L A R K E is in Edward.
Mhm.
So the Clarke has an E on the end,
Yes.
.com. So
Yes.
BelkisClarke.com.
Yes.
Belkis, it was such an honor and such a pleasure having you on with us today. And again, you're welcome to come back anytime. I love you. And to our listeners, have a blessed day. Thank you for joining us. See you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me on the Awakened Healer podcast. Did you enjoy the show? If yes, please subscribe and give me 5 on a review, that is, on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a review or your comments and let me know what you loved or would love to learn about on future shows. We all need encouragement, including me. Find out more information on my website at spiritledhealinginstitute.com. Be blessed, and remember, if you're good with you and good with God, you're good.